Alara stood in her small, sunlit kitchen, her hands moving with the steady rhythm of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting her craft. At 68, her body ached more than it used to, her knees protested each time she bent to lift a heavy pot, and her back stiffened after hours at the counter, but she pressed on without complaint. For her, cooking wasn't just food, it was memory, devotion, and the last way she knew how to hold her family together. The anniversary dinner for Ethan and Maya was meant to be intimate at first, a cozy gathering of 15 family members. But as days passed, messages trickled in. Can we bring a friend? What about my colleagues? It'll be fun, Mom, the more the merrier. The number swelled to 43. Alara smiled politely each time she heard the updates, though inside, anxiety gnawed at her. 43 mouths to feed was no small task, especially on the limited pension she had lived on since Richard's passing. She carefully stretched every dollar of her $867 grocery bill. She bought fresh vegetables from the farmer's market at dawn, haggling softly with vendors who knew her by name. She selected the best cuts of meat she could afford, polished bottles of affordable wine until they gleamed like treasures, and spent the rest on herbs, spices, and ingredients that would transform the ordinary into the memorable. Every choice, every detail, was made with love. The night before the party, her kitchen turned into a symphony of clattering pans, simmering sauces, and the aromatic blend of garlic, thyme, and rosemary that filled the air. Alara barely slept, moving from stove to counter, from oven to sink. She roasted chickens golden brown, braised lamb in red wine, kneaded dough for fresh bread, and whipped up 3 kinds of desserts. She worked with the intensity of a woman half her age, driven not by obligation but by longing, to feel useful, to feel needed, to feel remembered. And yet, a small, hollow ache tugged at her heart. Since Richard's death 2 years ago, she often wondered if she had become invisible to Ethan and Maya. They rarely called unless they needed something, a babysitter for the grandchildren, a quick meal, or now, a lavish anniversary party. She tried not to dwell on the thought, focusing instead on the rhythm of her knives against the cutting board and the fragrance of her soup simmering low and steady. By the time the sun rose on the day of the celebration, Alara's table was a masterpiece, platters of roasted vegetables gleaming with olive oil, steaming pots of stew, rows of pies cooling near the window, and bread so fresh it still crackled when she broke it. Her hands were raw from washing dishes, her body sore from standing for 24 hours straight. But as she looked at the feast spread before her, she allowed herself a small smile. This, she whispered softly into the quiet kitchen, is love made visible. Little did she know, that love, the sacrifice poured into every bite, would be brushed aside as though it were nothing more than background noise. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains as Alara carried the last tray of roasted lamb into the dining room. The house was already filled with the rich aroma of garlic, rosemary, and butter, scents that, to her, carried memories of family dinners long ago when love wasn't measured in money or appearances but in effort and care. She smiled faintly, thinking her son and his wife would surely feel the warmth she poured into every dish. But that illusion cracked when Ethan walked into the kitchen, scrolling on his phone. He barely glanced at the mountain of food she had prepared. "Oh, by the way," he said casually, "Maya ordered some platters from an outside caterer, just to supplement. You know, in case your dishes run out." The words landed like a knife. Alara froze, clutching the wooden spoon in her hand. Supplement? Did they really think her 24 carefully planned dishes weren't enough? The hours she'd spent chopping, stirring, and tasting blurred into a painful sense of invisibility. To Ethan, her effort seemed to be nothing more than an afterthought, a safety net, never the main show. Moments later, Maya appeared, makeup half done, exhaustion written across her face. She glanced at the kitchen crowded with pots and serving trays but offered no word of thanks. Instead, she muttered, "I just hope everything looks coordinated." Then she opened the fridge to make room for the catering boxes. Elara felt her chest tighten. She had once been the pillar of family gatherings, the chef whose food was celebrated by neighbors, friends, and Richard, her late husband, who had proudly called her cooking art. Now she was reduced to background noise, her love labor overshadowed by store-bought canapés. As she watched Maya rearrange her trays to fit in the new deliveries, Elara realized it wasn't just about food, it was about being seen. She wanted acknowledgement, even just a simple thank you, but the silence around her efforts was deafening. In that quiet, Elara's heart whispered a bitter truth: sometimes the greatest sacrifices are invisible to those who benefit from them most. The celebration unfolded with laughter, clinking glasses, and flashes from phones capturing carefully staged moments. Elara stayed mostly in the kitchen, replenishing trays, clearing empty plates, and watching through the doorway as guests praised Maya for the wonderful feast. Each compliment stung like a tiny splinter, embedding deeper in her chest. Not once did Maya redirect the gratitude toward her mother-in-law. Instead, she smiled gracefully, as if she had orchestrated every dish herself. By 6 p.m., Elara's back ached, her hands were raw from constant washing, and her stomach twisted with hunger. She hadn't eaten all day. Still, she told herself that sacrifice was love, and love meant keeping silent. Then came the moment that broke her. At 6:30, while carrying out a platter of untouched roasted vegetables, she overheard Ethan standing in the center of the living room, drink in hand, his voice booming above the chatter. "If no one wants more," he laughed, "we'll just feed it to the dog." The room erupted in laughter. A few guests chuckled politely, others shook their heads at the joke, but no one thought to glance toward the kitchen, where Elara stood frozen, the tray trembling in her hands. Her son's words sliced through her. He didn't just mock the food, he mocked her. Every sleepless hour, every dollar from her modest pension, every ounce of love she had poured into that meal, dismissed as dog food. She felt the world tilt. Her cheeks burned, her throat tightened, but she forced herself not to cry in front of strangers. Instead, she quietly turned back into the kitchen. With steady, deliberate movements, she began packing up the dishes she had prepared. The lamb, the casseroles, the desserts, every plate went back into her containers, sealed as though she were burying the last piece of her dignity. The clinking of lids and the rustle of foil grew louder in her ears than the laughter outside. No one came to stop her. No one noticed. At 6:45, Elara walked out the back door with her bags of food. The cool evening air hit her face like a slap, but it also carried with it a strange freedom. She did not slam doors or demand apologies. She simply vanished into the night, leaving Ethan and Maya in their decorated living room, oblivious at first, then stunned when they realized the kitchen was empty, the matriarch gone. Elara's silence spoke louder than any words could. It was the quiet rebellion of a woman who had finally had enough. Elara drove away from Ethan's house with her hands gripping the wheel tighter than ever before. The car smelled of roasted lamb and spiced vegetables, the very dishes that had been mocked as dog food. Each container in the back seat was heavy, not just with food, but with the weight of her humiliation. Her eyes blurred with unshed tears, and for a moment, she considered pulling over to cry. But instead, she pressed forward into the night, her heart pounding with both anger and sorrow. Her phone rang, breaking the suffocating silence. It was her nephew, Kevin. She hesitated, wiping her eyes before answering. Aunt Alara, his voice was frantic. I don't know what to do. The banquet's tomorrow, a wedding party for 200 guests, and my head chef's in the hospital with pneumonia. And the sous chef, he broke his arm tonight. It's a disaster. Everyone's counting on us, and I'm out of options. Alara's grip on the phone tightened. For a moment, she was too stunned to respond. She glanced at the containers stacked neatly in her back seat. All that food, untouched, unloved, rejected. Her heart began to beat with a new rhythm. Kevin, she said slowly, her voice steadier than she felt, I have food, good food. Enough to get you through the night, at least. And if you'll let me, I can step in. I can cook for you. There was a pause, followed by a sharp exhale of relief. Are you serious? Aunt Alara, you'd save me. You'd save the whole wedding. For the first time that day, Alara felt a spark of warmth, not from sacrifice, not from forced silence, but from possibility. What had been mocked and dismissed at Ethan's house might become salvation somewhere else. As she pulled into her driveway, she didn't unload the food. Instead, she left the engine running. Her humiliation was still raw, but something stronger began to grow inside her, determination. She wasn't just a widow with too much time and too little appreciation. She was a chef, a woman who had built her life on flavor, precision, and heart. And tonight, destiny had offered her a second chance. Alara turned the car around, heading not toward loneliness, but toward Kevin's restaurant, and perhaps, unknowingly, toward the beginning of a new chapter in her own life. Kevin's restaurant was chaos when Alara arrived. Waiters rushed back and forth, the kitchen was filled with half-prepped ingredients, and the anxious murmur of staff echoed like a storm. Kevin, pale and sweating, ran to her as if she were his last hope. Aunt Alara, thank God you're here, he said, gripping her hands. His voice cracked with desperation. I don't know what I would have done. Alara didn't waste a second. She tied her apron around her waist, her movements calm and deliberate, and immediately took command. You, get the vegetables cleaned and chopped. You, bring me the sauces and spices. We don't have time to panic, we have time to cook. The two inexperienced assistants looked wide-eyed, but there was something about Alara's voice that carried authority. They obeyed without question. With the containers of food she had saved from Ethan's party, Alara began working her magic. What had once been meant for a family gathering was reborn as an elegant wedding feast. She carved meats into delicate portions, garnished plates with fresh herbs, and transformed simple stews into shimmering masterpieces under candlelight. The kitchen, once frantic, moved to the rhythm of her command, like an orchestra finding its conductor. By the time the banquet began, the tables glowed with dishes that looked as though they had been crafted for royalty. Guests whispered in delight as servers placed plates before them. The aroma of rosemary, garlic, and caramelized onions filled the air, wrapping the room in warmth and wonder. The bride, Clara Davis, radiant in her gown, tasted the first bite of lamb and froze. Her eyes widened, then sparkled with astonishment. She turned to Kevin, her voice carrying over the music. Who cooked this? Kevin smiled, pointing toward Alara, who was standing quietly near the kitchen doors, her apron still dusted with flour. Clara approached her with genuine admiration. This is extraordinary. I've been to hundreds of weddings, but I've never tasted food like this. You're more than a chef, you're an artist. Have you ever considered working with foundations or large-scale events? The Ford Foundation is always searching for culinary talent like yours. For a moment, Alara could hardly breathe. Recognition, real recognition, had finally come, not from the people she had sacrificed her life for, but from strangers who saw her value instantly. Her eyes grew moist, though she held her composure. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief, pride, and something she had not felt in years, respect. That night, as the applause of satisfied guests echoed behind her, Alara realized the truth. She had not just saved Kevin's restaurant. She had saved herself. This was no longer the story of a forgotten widow cooking in silence. It was the rebirth of a woman stepping into her long-overdue spotlight. For days after the wedding banquet miracle, Alara felt as though a new fire had been lit inside her. Each morning she woke with purpose, her mind buzzing with ideas, not about what Ethan or Maya might need, but about what she wanted for herself. For the first time since Richard's death, she felt alive. It didn't take long for Ethan and Maya to notice her silence. No calls to check in, no meals delivered, no quiet visits with groceries tucked under her arm. When they finally showed up at her apartment one Sunday afternoon, they expected the same old Alara, gentle, forgiving, ready to serve. Instead, they found a woman transformed. "Mom, we came to apologize," Ethan began, his tone clipped and rehearsed. "We didn't mean to hurt you. But you can't just disappear like this. Maya and we need you." Alara studied them, her hands folded calmly in her lap. For years, she had longed for these words. But now, hearing them, she recognized the hollow ring in Ethan's voice. They didn't miss her. They missed what she could do for them. Maya leaned forward, her voice tight. "We know you're upset, but you're being unreasonable. We're family. Family means sticking together. You've always cooked for us, been there for us. That's your role." Alara's eyes sharpened. "My role? To be your unpaid servant? To pour my heart into meals you don't respect, into sacrifices you barely notice? No. Not anymore." Ethan blinked in shock. "Mom, don't be dramatic. You love cooking. You've always loved it." "Yes," Alara said softly, her voice steady but powerful. "I love cooking. But I'm done cooking only for you. I'm starting a professional career. I've been offered opportunities, real ones. People who see me not as a convenience, but as a chef, an artist. I won't turn that away just because you're used to taking me for granted." The room fell heavy with silence. Ethan's jaw tightened, his face reddening with frustration. Maya scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're too old for this. No one is going to take you seriously." Alara rose to her feet, her presence commanding in a way they had never seen before. "They already do. And whether you accept it or not, I am no longer the convenient mother who fixes your mistakes and fills your table. If you want me in your life, it will be as a respected woman, not as your shadow." Ethan's anger cracked into disbelief. Maya muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable." They left soon after, slamming the door behind them. When the silence returned, Alara did not cry. She felt something else, freedom. For the first time in decades, she had chosen herself. And she vowed she would never go back. 6 months later, the woman who had once been dismissed as a convenient mother had become a name spoken with respect in Napa Valley's culinary circles. Alara's table was no longer just a catering service, it was a brand synonymous with elegance and heart. Her menus blended tradition with innovation, each dish infused with the same love she had once poured into her family's meals, but now celebrated by strangers who valued her artistry. Her calendar brimmed with bookings, charity galas, corporate banquets, intimate weddings. Critics praised her ability to transform simple ingredients into unforgettable experiences. For the first time in decades, Alara felt she wasn't invisible. She was seen, admired, and, most importantly, respected. With her growing income, she finally allowed herself a luxury she had secretly dreamed of, a sunlit apartment overlooking a green park. Every morning, she sat on her balcony with a cup of coffee, watching joggers and children below, her heart swelling with a freedom she hadn't known since Richard was alive. This was hers. Not Ethan's, not Maya's, hers alone. It was at the height of her new life that fate brought an unexpected encounter. One evening, she was overseeing a high-profile event at the country club. She wore her chef's coat embroidered with Alara's table in elegant script, her posture confident as she directed her team. Laughter and music filled the air as guests savored her dishes. Then she saw him. Ethan, standing frozen at the edge of the ballroom, holding a glass of wine. His eyes swept the room until they landed on her, the woman he had once belittled, now commanding a room of powerful clients with ease. Their gazes locked. For the first time, Ethan looked at his mother not with expectation or entitlement, but with awe. He hesitated, then approached. "Mom," his voice cracked, unsteady. "I didn't know. I mean, I never realized you could." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I was wrong. About everything. About you." Alara regarded him calmly, her hands folded in front of her. She no longer felt the need to plead for recognition, she had already earned it. Still, beneath her composure, her heart stirred. She saw not the arrogant son who had once wounded her, but a man struggling with shame and regret. Ethan lowered his head. "I'm sorry, Mom. Truly. I let Maya's bitterness blind me. I treated you like a servant. And you deserved so much more." For a long moment, Alara said nothing. Then, gently, she placed a hand on his arm. "Ethan, I don't need your approval anymore. But I do accept your apology. Respect isn't something I'll beg for, it's something I demand. If you're ready to give me that, then perhaps we can begin again." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he nodded. Around them, the celebration continued, but for Alara, the true victory was not the praise of strangers, it was standing tall in front of her son, no longer diminished, but fully herself. That night, as she returned to her apartment and looked out over the park, Alara realized that freedom wasn't just about walking away from pain, it was about building a new life where dignity and love could coexist. And at last, she had found both. Time softened the sharp edges of betrayal, replacing them with something more enduring, understanding. Ethan, once blind to the sacrifices his mother had made, began to see her clearly. He visited her new apartment often, sometimes bringing small gifts, a bouquet of lilies, a jar of honey from a local farmer, or a bottle of wine he thought she might enjoy. They weren't grand gestures, but Alara noticed the difference. For the first time, Ethan was trying, not to demand, not to take, but simply to give. Their conversations, once shallow and transactional, grew deeper. Ethan asked about her recipes, about her memories of his father Richard, and about the nights she had spent alone in the kitchen after long workdays. For the first time, Alara felt that her son was listening, not out of duty, but out of genuine love. Becoming a grandmother took on a new shape as well. Alara no longer felt pressured to babysit on demand or to cook endless meals without thanks. Instead, she chose her moments carefully. She attended her grandchildren's recitals, brought them to the park on weekends, and shared with them the secrets of her cooking, teaching them how food could be a language of love. In their innocent eyes, she wasn't just Grandma the cook, she was a storyteller, a mentor, and a safe harbor. For Ethan, watching his children laugh with their grandmother was bittersweet. He finally grasped what he and Maya had almost destroyed, not just Alara's role as a mother, but the living legacy of love she carried. One evening, as he watched Alara knead dough with his youngest daughter perched beside her, flour smudged on both their cheeks, he whispered, "I almost lost this. I almost lost her." Maya, meanwhile, kept her distance. Though she attended family gatherings, the tension lingered. Alara no longer sought her approval, nor did she allow herself to be drawn into Maya's dismissiveness. Instead, she stood firmly in her dignity, polite but detached. The imbalance of power had shifted. Alara was no longer the overlooked matriarch, but the respected elder whose presence was valued. Alara often reflected on the strange path that had led her here. Once, she thought revenge would be silence, withdrawal, or bitterness. But in truth, the sweetest justice was her new life, filled with purpose, respect, and love freely given rather than demanded. Her journey proved that worth is not measured by sacrifice alone, but by the courage to claim one's voice after years of being silenced. One quiet afternoon, as she sat on her balcony overlooking the park, Ethan joined her with 2 cups of tea. They sat in companionable silence, the late sun painting the sky gold. Ethan finally spoke. "Mom," he said softly, "you've built something beautiful. Not just this life, but us. You gave me a second chance to be your son. Thank you." Alara smiled gently, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "It wasn't about giving you a second chance, Ethan. It was about giving myself one." As the laughter of her grandchildren drifted up from the park below, Alara knew her true legacy wasn't just recipes or a successful business. It was the love and respect she had fought to reclaim, and the example she now set for the next generation, that dignity, once embraced, could never again be taken away.